Now, despite the fact that the fall of Anakin Skywalker was obviously meant to be one of the things the prequels showcased, and that Obi-Wan himself admits to failing Anakin during their duel in Revenge of the Sith, I still think it's very much worth taking a closer look at exactly how Anakin fell to the dark side, and just how Obi-Wan failed him. And in this video, I'll focus more on the part about how Obi-Wan failed because, honestly, I don't think he himself has any real understanding of what went wrong and why he might truly be to blame, at least not when he initially acknowledged his guilt, that is. Instead, I think his admission was more like one final plea or attempt to reach Anakin, a teacher offering his student an out, if you will, by insisting the fault for what had gone wrong was his and not theirs. And it wouldn't be until well after the fact, well after Obi-Wan had gone into exile and had time to reflect and commune with his old master Qui-Gon Jinn, that he likely saw the error not only in his ways, but in the ways of the Jedi of that time period on the whole, and call it irony, fate, or something in between, but bearing witness to the downfall of Anakin helped Obi-Wan rediscover what it meant to be a true Jedi, and would then allow him to start Luke down the right path, the path that he'd failed to send Anakin down. But just how exactly did Obi-Wan fail Anakin, and fail him so badly that he went from this seemingly altruistic boy who dreamed of being a Jedi and freeing slaves, to a Sith who murdered children and would go on to do countless other horrendous acts? How could Obi-Wan have messed up that badly, and shouldn't some of the blame fall on Anakin? And to quickly answer that latter question, yes, of course, some of the blame, and just how much can certainly be debated, does fall squarely on the shoulders of Anakin Skywalker himself. He was the one who ultimately committed the evil deeds, and no level of failure on the part of his teacher could ever begin to fully excuse his actions. Furthermore, the young Anakin we meet in The Phantom Menace is not quite as altruistic or all good as he might first appear. In reality, he is a rather ambitious and prideful child. How so, you might ask? Well, there's the fact that the first thing he does after Qui-Gon and the others reach his home while taking shelter from a sandstorm is to show off something he has built, that being C-3PO of course, in an effort to impress Padme. Later then, they're all eating and he talks about how he is the only human who is capable of pod racing and that he has built the fastest pod racer ever. Later on, he tells Qui-Gon about how he wants to be the first to visit all the stars in the galaxy. And let's also not forget that it's immediately after Anakin spots Qui-Gon's lightsaber, thus identifying him as a Jedi and a possible ticket off the planet and a life away from slavery, that he asks them if they have shelter, and then he insists, despite having zero clue as to how far away that sandstorm even is, that they'll never make it back to their ship in time, and that they can and should take shelter at his home. It's then while eating that Anakin admits to having seen Qui-Gon's laser sword or lightsaber, and knows that only a Jedi uses that kind of weapon, thus confirming he did indeed know ahead of time what Qui-Gon was. He further goes on to tell them that he had a dream that he'd become a Jedi, and that he'd come back and free all the slaves. And sure, a lot of these things said by young Anakin might seem like the innocuous dreams and aspirations of a child, but it was these traits and misconceptions about the Jedi that Obi-Wan needed to, shall we say, help Anakin unlearn if he was ever going to become a Jedi. Because something else that young Anakin believed is that no one could kill a Jedi, that they were almost like unkillable warriors that traversed the galaxy and righted all the wrongs they came across. And in a sense, Anakin had almost deified the Jedi. And again, these were concepts that Obi-Wan needed to train out of him. However, as we quickly see in Attack of the Clones, Obi-Wan has failed to do that. Anakin seems more prideful than ever, and he talks to Padme about how, in many ways, he has become superior or more powerful than his teacher. And as we know, being a Jedi is not about power, it's about wisdom. And Anakin should very much understand and have accepted that by this point. Then later, after losing his mother, he tells Padme that someday he'll be the most powerful Jedi ever, and will even be strong enough to stop people from dying. The idea that Jedi can or should be something like deities or gods that can control things such as life and death is an idea that is still very much alive and well in him. The true failure of Obi-Wan, though, gets highlighted in Revenge of the Sith when we find he has become a member of the Jedi Council, and you might wonder why or how that proves anything, least of all that he has failed Anakin. But remember what Obi-Wan once said to his master Qui-Gon, that if he would just follow the code, he would be on the Council, and that Qui-Gon simply replies by saying, "I will do what I must, Obi-Wan." And this interaction between master and apprentice told us two very, very important things. First, that Obi-Wan likely saw it as a great honor to be on the Council, which it no doubt is, and that he likely coveted a spot on it. Second, it told us that being on the Council meant pretty much nothing to Qui-Gon Jinn, and that doing what he must, or following the will of the Force, was more important than strictly following the Jedi Code. In other words, he wasn't interested in appeasing the other Jedi who had lost their way and were more worried about the politics of the Republic, and instead only wanted to do what he felt he must to serve the Force. He had no interest in satisfying his pride and being on that council. So when we find Obi-Wan on that very council, we know he failed to carry out Qui-Gon's final request, at least in regards to how Qui-Gon had hoped he would carry it out. Because the reason why Qui-Gon makes Obi-Wan promise to train Anakin is not just so that Anakin, the chosen one, will get trained, but also so that someone who has been trained in the ways of the true Jedi, like Qui-Gon trained Obi-Wan, will now train Anakin. And that is the key here, that Qui-Gon Jinn in The Phantom Menace was meant to be the shining example of what a Jedi is actually supposed to be, while those on the council had lost their way, which is why Qui-Gon had no interest in being a part of it. And though a case could certainly be made that the only reason Obi-Wan was on the council was due to attrition, or because of how many masters were lost during the Clone Wars, Obi-Wan still accepted the position, and taken up the rank of general and led armies in the Clone Wars, something I highly doubt his master Qui-Gon would have done, or wanted for Anakin. In closing here, Obi-Wan failed Anakin by not training him as Qui-Gon would have trained him, and how Obi-Wan himself had no doubt been trained. And again, this doesn't excuse Anakin's actions, not in the least. And in a future video, I'll go more into Anakin's fall from more of his perspective, and delve more into his personal faults. But the fact of the matter here is that the traits that Obi-Wan needed to correct in Anakin, and the beliefs about the Force and the Jedi that he needed to instill in him, didn't happen. And that is why Obi-Wan exiled himself, because he had indeed failed. But what made him a true Jedi in the end is that he spent that time in exile figuring out what he had done wrong, as well as planning to train and protecting the one who could one day right not only his wrongs, but the failings of the Jedi on the whole. Not to mention, return the Order to prominence, which is something his old master Qui-Gon Jinn would have certainly approved of. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think of Obi-Wan Kenobi's story, about his failure with Anakin and his redemption through Luke. So leave a comment below, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.